Okay, all right. I'd like to begin today by talking about wildfires. Wildfires are something that I feel like I see a lot on the news these days. It's really quite remarkable how much devastation that these wildfires can cause to people, to property, but especially to the forests themselves. You see a wildfire pass through a forest, you know that it's been there. The landscape is just burnt. There's ash everywhere. But I was surprised to learn, I don't remember when I learned this, but I was surprised to learn that fire is actually a natural part of ecosystem cycles. It can actually help promote diversity of species in the area, and the forest actually grows back, sometimes even being better than it was before. Now, the real question is, how does this happen? Well, I learned this week that it happens because the wind carries organisms, seeds, and spores to these burnt landscapes, and from that, a forest is actually able to grow again. Give it enough time. Did you hear that? Seeds, spores, and organisms carried on the wind to this burnt landscape. Now, I read that, and I thought, that almost sounds unbelievable. Carried on the wind. But this is a good picture of the grace of God. God is showing grace to this landscape by sending seeds, spores, organisms on the wind to this burnt landscape. Now, we can think of grace as being favor. We can think of it as being blessings or anything good things that God gives. This is what grace is. So for us, something that we are called to do is to bring grace wherever we go as followers of Jesus. The text that we are going to be looking at today is 1 Samuel chapter 25. 1 Samuel chapter 25. This is the story of Abigail and David. Abigail and David. Abigail is an intelligent and beautiful woman. The text describes her. She is married to a man named Nabal. Nabal is described as being pretty mean, being bad-tempered, and by being a very rich guy. That's how Nabal is described. So David is with his band of soldiers out in the wilderness, and he is near Nabal's property. Nabal has sent out his shepherds into the area, and they are watching the sheep. So David does Nabal a favor. He actually protects Nabal's shepherds and sheep from any people that would take it, any raiders, and he doesn't take it himself. He actually is a very stand-up guy in this situation. David is showing grace, actually, to Nabal. So when it comes time for sheep shearing, this is a festive time. David thinks, he's like, well, I've done Nabal a solid. I've shown him actually hospitality. I've shown him grace in this sense. I'm going to ask for some food for my men after we've put in probably months of watching these shepherds. So he sends messengers to Nabal, and they ask for some food for his men. However, Nabal hears this, and he responds. He says, absolutely not. He's like, I'm not going to do that. And he gives a fair amount of insult to David in the process of doing that. We're going to actually look at this, what he says to David's messengers a little bit later. But what he does is he repays the good that David did with evil. This is a real slap in the face to David. So the messengers come back to David, they give him the message, and David is pretty livid. It's pretty tough when you do something good and then you receive evil in return. David does not take it well at all. He actually says to his men, strap on your swords. I'm taking 400 of you. We're actually going to go kill Nabal, and we're going to kill every man that belongs to Nabal. So then they gather their swords and they head off marching on the road to Nabal's household. So this sets the scene for us today. And we are going to be looking at how do we bring grace everywhere we go. And we're going to be looking at Abigail for how we do this. We're going to be looking at her actions and the interactions Abigail has for how do we bring grace wherever we go. Okay, the first way we bring grace is to show unmerited favor. To show unmerited favor. This is actually probably the most popular way or most common way we as Christians think about grace, unmerited favor. Certainly Paul talks a lot about grace in this sense. But yes, show unmerited favor. So a servant hears the response that Nabal gives to David's messengers, and he thinks to himself, this is not going to bode well for any of us. So then he goes to Abigail, and he tells her what happened, and then this is what he says. 1 Samuel 25, and we are in verse 17. Verse 17, the servant says to Abigail, now think it over and see what you can do, because disaster is hanging over our master and his whole household. He is such a wicked man that no one can talk to him. So he goes and finds Abigail and says this to her. So we have to think, why did he find Abigail? Well, the answer is Abigail is a person of grace. Abigail is a person of grace from whom good things come. Compare that to her husband Nabal. Nabal's a wicked guy. So he is not a person of grace. He's a person from whom wicked things come. So it makes sense that the servant would find Abigail, who is a person of grace. So Abigail begins to assemble this gift. She assembles animals, she bakes a lot of food, and she's going to take it to David as a gift, a sort of peace offering to him. But what she's doing here is she is showing unmerited favor specifically to her husband Nabal. Now, how is she doing that? Well, her husband is a very wicked guy. God would actually kill him about 10 days after this story. He's a wicked guy. He does not deserve to be saved, yet she is showing him favor nonetheless. She's showing unmerited favor. So this is really cool because Abigail is actually foreshadowing Jesus. She's showing unmerited favor to her husband. Jesus shows unmerited favor to us. So she is a Christ type. She is a type. She foreshadows Jesus. So Jesus shows unmerited favor to you and me. So we as the church, we are the church of Jesus. This is Christ's church. We show unmerited favor to the world. Okay? This could look like baking cookies for a neighbor that you're not really on good terms with. Maybe this neighbor doesn't want to talk to you, and you got to try to find them. And anytime you try to talk to them, they try to avoid you. It might be baking cookies and saying, hey, here's some cookies. That's showing unmerited favor to your neighbor. Maybe it's making a conscious decision to honor the people that God has placed in government over us, even if you do not agree with that person. That's showing unmerited favor. Maybe it's giving time to a person who is not your favorite. You could be using your time to do something else, maybe working on the house, maybe cleaning something, working on this, but it's like, I'm actually going to give my time to someone who's not my favorite. That is unmerited favor as well. Or maybe you're at a fast food place, and then this worker is being pretty rude to you, and you make a decision to show patience to that person. That's you showing unmerited favor. So I was talking to a friend, and he said he was talking to somebody else, and they were talking about the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan being the story about the Jew who is beat up and robbed, and he's left by the side of the road, and several prestigious and religious Jews pass him by. But then a Samaritan, the enemy of the Jews and Samaritans hate each other. A Samaritan comes and takes care of him, and he goes above and beyond what is required of him to take care of this Jew. But my friend said the guy he was talking to had an interpretation of this story, and his interpretation was that we do good to the people who do good to us. That is not the interpretation of the Good Samaritan. We do good to the people who we really do not want to do good to. We show unmerited favor to the people that really do not deserve favor at all. And the reason is because we have received unmerited favor from God. That's the favor that we've received. So then we show that favor to other people. That's the point of the Good Samaritan. So for our application for this point, I think if somebody came to mind right as we've been our time together right now, if somebody came to mind, somebody that you really maybe don't prefer, someone perhaps that you really do not want to show favor to, well, that's probably the person God would like you to show unmerited favor to, okay? So that's the application. Think of that person, maybe make a plan for how you could make that come to pass. Okay, the second way that we show grace, or that we bring grace, is to recognize the assignment. Recognize the assignment. So Abigail makes it to David. She presents him with this gift, and she apologizes. She says, okay, I was not there when your messengers came. I'm sorry. And then she starts talking about all this stuff. But she begins to do something very interesting. She begins to speak into David's life in a spiritual sense. This is a very interesting thing. This is a difficult thing. When we do this for other people, when we start to try to make sense of what is going on in someone's life in a spiritual way, there's some risk involved. Maybe somebody doesn't appreciate it. They might not agree with our point of view. Maybe they think we're being too spiritual, or we're trying to read into the matter too much. But Abigail is speaking into David's life in a spiritual sense. Look with me in verse 28. Verse 28. Please forgive your servant's presumption. The Lord, your God, will certainly make a lasting dynasty for my Lord, because you fight the Lord's battles, and no wrongdoing will be found in you as long as you live. So Abigail, she said, God is going to make a lasting line for you. This is interesting that she says this, because we have to ask, how does she know this? How does she know this? God actually didn't reveal that David would have a line that would last forever until 2 Samuel chapter 7. Yet Abigail, she didn't get all of it right, but she got some of it. She's like, well, you're going to have a lasting line. How does she know that? I think, this is my personal opinion, but I think it's because God revealed it to her. I think she had a relationship with God as she's praying about what's going on. I think God revealed it to her. It's like, I really like David, and I'm going to bless David, and David's going to have a long line. Okay. So now for recognizing the assignment. So we look at David's life. David was a commander in the army of Israel. He fought Israel's battles. He also fought Saul's battles. Saul is the king of Israel. Then he's off in the wilderness alone. We could say he also fought his own battles. That's kind of an outsider's perspective looking at David's life. But Abigail, she does something different. She looks at David's life and she says, you fight the Lord's battles. Abigail recognized the battles that David fought were actually the Lord's battles. When an outside observer would look at his life and sees, like, well, he's fighting for Israel, he's fighting for Saul, he's fighting for himself. Abigail looks past that and sees, no, you are fighting the Lord's battles. She is recognizing the assignments that the Lord has given to David. Okay. So for us, what does this look like for us? So I'll give you a personal example for my dad. So my dad has Parkinson's disease. He also it's accompanied by dementia. Okay? So his brain is shutting down slowly and his body is shutting down slowly. So this is a bad thing. This should not have happened in a perfect world, but sin is in this world. Therefore, my dad's Parkinson's and it's dementia and he is slowly dying. And it's a hard thing. It's something that I grieve about, something I've got a lot of difficult feelings about. So that's on one side of things. This is a bad thing. It shouldn't have happened. But on the other side of things, there's an assignment from God for my father in this situation. Recognizing the assignment from my father means knowing that this is the final stretch for him. Perhaps it's one of the most important times of his life between him and God is giving my father an opportunity. God is giving my father an opportunity if there's any place that he's not loving God with all of his heart, with all of his soul, with all of his mind, and with all of his strength. God is giving my father an opportunity to partner with the Almighty in order to do just that. That's the assignment that God is giving my father during this time. God is giving my father an opportunity to finish this final stretch and to enter into the presence of God with no regrets. That's recognizing the assignment. So for us, maybe I have a relative in the military. And that's a scary thing because we live in a scary world. There's lots of conflicts rising up, and I don't really know. I hope this person is safe. Well, recognizing the assignment in this situation means, perhaps it means God is asking me to trust this relative and place this relative in my head into God's very capable hands. That's the assignment for me during this season. Or maybe there's somebody in my life that just really is antagonistic, really opposed to Christianity. And this person is just very difficult to be around. It's not a very life-giving person for me. I'm not my favorite person to be around. Perhaps recognizing the assignment that God has given means that I am placed in this person's life for a reason, and that this person is placed in my life for a reason as well, and that I am to show light and bring grace to this person. That's recognizing the assignment in that situation. Or say my marriage is not going as well as I would like it to be. Maybe I'm experiencing more loneliness than I thought. Well, perhaps for this one, recognizing the assignment means that God is trying to show me that he is the number one place in my life, and he will not share that place with anybody else, not even with your spouse. But he is teaching me to get my sense of well-being from him and from him alone. Maybe that's recognizing the assignment in that situation. Okay, so for us, this is very powerful when we're able to point this out in people's lives. It actually infuses, it brings a lot of meaning to life. We're able to see, it's like, wait, these aren't just random things that are happening to me. These are often our bad things, but God is at work even in the worst times of life. God is giving assignments even in times when we look and think, there's no way God is in this. God is present, and he is still working. Okay. So for application here, this is one we have to approach, I say, a little carefully. So I give two directions before we recognize the assignment in each other's lives. The first one I'd say is to affirm the difficulty of the situation. If it's a hard thing, we'll say that. This is a hard thing. I'm sorry, this is a very difficult thing that is happening to you when you are going to somebody else in their situation. Affirm the difficulty of it. That's super important. Two, I would also say emphasize that this should not have happened. If what they are going through is a result of living in a sinful world, well, then I think it's worth pointing out, it's like this should not have happened, right? In a perfect world, we would be in relationship with God, and things like Parkinson's and dementia would not be in this world. So I think it's worth pointing out, it's like this should not have happened. Then, after you do that, very, I'd say gently, very lovingly, you can recognize the assignment that you see in somebody's life. What is God up to? What opportunities is God giving to this person? So yeah, that's the application for that one. Going to somebody to help recognize the assignment that God has given to them, but also to affirm the difficulty and emphasize that this should not have happened. Okay, moving on. The third way that we can bring grace to each other is to see what is really going on. See what is really going on. For this one, let's turn back to verse 10. Verse 10, this is Nabal's original answer to David's messengers. Nabal says, answered David's servants, "Who is this David? Who is this son of Jesse? Many servants are breaking away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread and water and the meat I have slaughtered for my shearers and give it to men coming from who knows where?" So Nabal looks at the situation. He sees David on the run from Saul in the wilderness, and he sees, well, David must be a disloyal servant that's broken away from his master and trying to build his own kingdom. Nabal looks at the situation. That's what he sees. Let's contrast that or compare that with what Abigail says in verse 29. Verse 29, this is Abigail continuing to address David in verse 29. "Even though someone is pursuing you to take your life, the life of my Lord will be bound securely in the bundle of the living by the Lord your God. But the lives of your enemies he will hurl away as from the pocket of a sling." Abigail looks at David's situation, and she sees what is really going on. That even though his life looks like a failure right now, God is actually present, and he's at work, and he is going to keep his promises, and he's going to protect David. Even if the king of Israel and all of his army are after David, God is protecting David. She's seeing what is really going on. So for us, situations can often look different than they actually are. Satan is pretty good at twisting the truth. He's pretty good at twisting things to look a different way from what they actually are. We see this with Nabal and Abigail. Nabal sees the situation, and he makes an assumption. Abigail, she sees what's really going on. So Satan is a master of deception. That's actually one of his favorite strategies that he likes to use. He likes to deceive. This is why I believe in 2 Timothy, Paul says we need to gently instruct, because there is so much deception. If you just try to blow past the deception, it's not really going to work. That's why he says gently instruct. That's how you combat deception. But for us, it also means avoiding jumping to conclusions, okay? This, you can also think of the New Testament where a charge against an elder can't be accepted unless there's 2 or 3 witnesses. Why? It's because Satan is pretty good at deception. Things can appear one way, but in reality, they are totally different. So some examples of this, say there's an employee that leaves a business, and he says that boss was tyrannical, he was mean, he was vindictive, and then he spreads that, people start to believe him. Well, in reality, the boss actually could have been pretty kind, could have been pretty merciful, and then the employee, he's the one who's the problem. That's how things actually are. Or say we're in a class, maybe a college class, and it's a written exam, and one student is caught for cheating, and that's what the professor thinks, but in reality, it was the other student that was cheating off of that student. That's an example as well. Or say there's an example of a marriage, and the wife is saying that her husband is exhibiting some bullying behavior to her. But he seems like a pretty kind, seems like a pretty generous guy to everybody else. Well, the reality of the situation is that's a persona that he puts up, and in reality, when the doors are closed, he's much different than his public persona. So the difficulty with all of these things is like, well, how do we see what is really going on? Satan is a master at deception. How do we know what is true, what is not? How do we see things as they actually are? Well, the answer is found in Daniel. The book of Daniel, chapter 2, verse 22. This is Daniel after the dream. Nebuchadnezzar's dream is revealed to him. This is what he says in the 22nd verse of chapter 2 of Daniel. Daniel says about God, he reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in the darkness, and light dwells within him. So how do we see what's really going on? Well, God is the one who knows the deep things. He's the one who knows the hidden things. He's the one who knows what's in the darkness. He brings what's in the darkness into the light. He's the one who can illuminate it. So it would make sense if there's a situation and I don't really know what to do, I don't really know what to think, then God is the one who I should ask about this situation. Why? Because he reveals mysteries. He says, call on me and I will reveal to you deep and unsearchable things that you could not have known, that you do not know. He is the one who reveals these things to us. So the application for this one is to pray. We think about Abigail. Abigail seemed to know some stuff that really, how would she know if she was not in a relationship with God and if God had not revealed to her? So for us, I think if there's a situation where it's like, I don't really know what to think, I think it would be a good idea to spend some time in prayer, talking with God, asking him for clarity, for him to illuminate what is really going on in this situation, okay? So that's the third way that we bring grace to the world, to each other. We see what is really going on, and we do that through prayer because the revealer of mysteries can reveal what is really going on to us. Okay, the next way that we can bring grace is to remember God's promises. To remember God's promises. Look with me, flip back with me, if you are in the Word, flip back with me to 1 Samuel chapter 25, and we will look at verses 30 through 31. 30 through 31. Abigail says, "When the Lord has fulfilled for my Lord every good thing he promised concerning him, and has appointed him ruler over Israel, my Lord will not have on his conscience the staggering burden of needless bloodshed or of having avenged himself. And when the Lord your God has brought my Lord success, remember your servant." Again, pointing to Abigail's relationship with God. How could she really know this? She seems to see with clarity that transcends what a normal human would be able to look at in a regular situation. I think God revealed it to her. But what she's also doing is reminding David of the promises that God has made to him, and she is affirming that those promises will come to pass. If you think about David during this time in his life, he's in the wilderness. He had a very promising military career, and that's all gone. He was married to a woman, Michal, and she has been given to another man. David's had a lot of close calls. He lives in constant danger. He has been betrayed many times. The text says that men came to David, and the text describes them as being distressed, in debt, and discontented. In other words, if there's anybody who could use some grace, if there's anybody who could benefit from grace being brought to him, it's David during this time in his life. And for David, grace showed up in the form of Abigail. God used Abigail to give David the grace that he needed during this particular season of his life. So for us, it's important to remember the promises of God. It's important to recall the promises of God for each other. That's an important thing. But say, for me, money is tight right now. I'm in a season where I just never seem to be able to get my finances together. It just never seems like there's more than enough. Well, in that situation, I need to remember that there is a God who promised to take care of me. There is a God who does provide. That there is a God that still clothes the lilies, and he still feeds the sparrows, and he still promises to give me what I need. Why? Because he said so. Say the upcoming school year is approaching, and I'm not feeling super good about friendships or social situations. Well, and I'm feeling some fear about that. Well, this is a good opportunity for me to remember that God is going to give me what I need to accomplish the task that he has set out for me this school year. That he is going to give me the relationships that I need in order to accomplish the purpose that he has placed before me. Say I have a relative. He grew up as a Christian, and then now he's abandoned the faith. He's not a Christian anymore, and it's very confusing. Well, this is a good time to remember that if this relative was really a Christian, God is going to bring him back. He is the God that does leave the 99 to go get the one. He is the God who does rescue prodigals. And even if he wasn't a Christian, well, God is still the one we should talk to about this, because he's the one who's able to do something about saving this person. That's our God. Say I'm wondering if I'm forgiven after a sin. I'm really struggling with this. Well, it's a good time to remember that if I do confess my sins, he is faithful and he is just to forgive me of my sins, and he will cleanse me from all unrighteousness. Okay? Say life looks pretty bleak in front of me, and I'm sort of wondering, I don't really see how this is going to work out. I don't know if God has any good for me left in this world. Well, this is a good time to remember that God does have good plans for me, plans to help me and not to harm me, plans to give me a hope and a future. God does have good plans for you, and this is a good time to remember this. So for us, I think it's a good idea to remind, it's a good idea to remind myself of the promises of God. But this is very important and very meaningful when we can remind each other of the promises of God. If we see somebody in a dark season, then we can come alongside them and remind them what God has promised, that he is going to take care of them, that he is going to turn this situation around, that there is good at the end of this path. To conclude, last week we talked about the effects of sin. That was a hard message. We talked about how sin is often more widespread than we could have thought. Well, the really good news is that grace is like this too, except grace is more powerful than sin. Paul describes it as, well, where sin abounds, grace actually abounds all the more. We think of Adam, okay, he sinned, sin went to all of us, but we think of Jesus, what Jesus did, he came, grace upon grace, which is the Old Testament law with Jesus. Jesus comes as a gift of grace, and if we respond to him in faith, we receive life, we receive acceptance, we receive forgiveness. I become a child of God, I'm a new creation, and I've got a good future, and God, I'm walking with God, and I'm living life the way that I'm supposed to live it, or the way I was created to live it. This is all the grace that we receive from God. So we can think back to this story. Abigail brought grace to Nabal. She saved his life. Abigail brought grace to David. She kept him from committing a pretty heinous sin. But she also went far beyond that. And this is the overflowing nature of grace. Abigail was able to look into David's life and be able to comment on it spiritually. She was able to help him recognize the assignments that God has given to David during this season. She was able to look and see what was really going on in David's life, and that was probably very validating for David. When everybody's got different opinions about what's going on, she saw what was really going on, and that must have been very validating for him. And then she was able to remind him of the promises of God, which must have been very encouraging for David. She brought him grace when he really needed it, perhaps when one of the times he needed it the most. And the wonderful thing is, we bring grace to others, but God brings grace to us. And it's from him bringing grace to us, that's the way that we can bring grace to others. Okay, so we think about the burnt landscape. That's how we started this whole thing. The burnt landscape after the wildfires. It doesn't really look like anything good can happen after a wildfire's been through a forest. But you and I, we bring grace to the burnt landscapes in our life. We bring grace in our lives and to each other's lives. And this is what God does, just like with the seeds and the spores and the organisms carried on the wind to the burnt landscape, and from that comes a flourishing forest. God can do a lot with the grace that we bring. He actually is able to multiply it. God is able to do far more with our grace than we ever could have thought, than we ever could have dreamed, than we ever could have imagined. Because our God is good, and he's a God of all grace. Okay, I will close in prayer, then we'll transition. I'll close this sermon in prayer. Then we will transition into a time of communion. Bow your heads. God, thank you that you are a God of all grace. Thank you that you are good, that you show up with what we need for whatever we are facing in our current situation. Thank you that you have lavished grace on us, that you have poured it upon us, that your Spirit lives with us. Thank you that you bring life wherever you go, even if there are burnt landscapes in our life, if there are places of death, if there are places that are graves, that you are the God that transforms those graves into gardens. You can turn the burnt landscapes into beautiful forests. You can turn hopeless situations around, that's who you are. You change things when you show up. So God, I pray that you would help us be people of grace, that we would bring grace wherever we go, whoever we talk to. And I pray that you would encourage the people in this room right now. Would you look into all of their situations and would you meet them? I pray that you would pour your blessings on them. Would you pour your favor? Would you give them good things? Would you satisfy them with good, Father? We love you. We pray all of these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.